Always.
Good being with you, Jerry.
The GOP took over the House with a mandate to cut spending, so the cut-as-you-go proposal was included in the House rules for the 112th Congress. The rules state that for every new dollar that is spent, an old dollar needs to be cut. But does this rule only cap the amount of spending that has already occurred, or will it actually help cut into our record national debt? Congressman Mike Conaway is a Republican from Texas who authored this cut-as-you-go language. All right, Congressman, did I get it right? Can you describe it any better than that?
Well, a little bit differently, perhaps, not necessarily better. I'd never presume to describe something better than someone who gets paid to do that. But we've made a lot of promises to ourselves that we cannot afford, mandatory spending. And what this provision does is that if you've come up with some new mandatory spending, some new promise that you want to make to the American people, you have to eliminate existing spending and the promises that are already in place in order to provide your new program. The idea is to make it as difficult to create a new program as possible so that we quit digging the hole deeper.
Well, we've got a deep hole, that's for darn sure. Will it cut the deficit, though? Will it help us get rid of this huge debt and not just stop new programs?
Well, mandatory spending is a long-term, multi-year issue that yes, it will. If you reduce that, obviously will affect the deficit over a long period of time. 2/3 of our budget is mandatory spending. 1/3 of the budget is discretionary spending. We must deal with the mandatory side of it in order to make a meaningful attempt to balance our budget, live within our means, those kinds of things. So reining in mandatory spending is important. Cut-go will allow us to not make the matters worse while we try to find those areas within mandatory spending that exist. Some $60+ trillion in promises that we've made to each other over the next 75 years that future generations of Americans cannot afford. So if we're going to make a meaningful impact on the deficits, on the debt, and our financial house, then we have to deal with mandatory spending. And this is just a small slice of that issue.
Congressman, the GOP has said they want to cut $100 billion out of spending to that end. Is it going to happen? And if so, what programs are going to get cut?
Well, the $100 billion was an October 2010 estimate. We had a full year to work with on the discretionary side. We've now spent the first half or the first quarter of this year not doing anything at all. So getting to the $100 billion per se is you got to backdate that to October. Dealing with the last 9 months we have of this deal, we've put a modest, tiny down payment on it last week by cutting Congress's or the House of Representatives' own budget and working
largely
toward
ceremonial.
rolling back to but it's $35 million, maybe ceremonial to a big wig like yourself.
So again,
but it's
how are you going to get those big numbers, sir?
Well, you're going to have to roll back to 2008 levels of discretionary spending as the step in the right direction.
Are there specific programs that should be cut?
Well, everything that got increases except for defense, and from 2008 to 2010, we would roll that back to the spending levels of 2008. So everything in the discretionary menu would have their spending roll back to those levels, so that you take that new money that they've not really become accustomed to except for the last 2 years, you take that money out of the system and go back to where we were in 2008.
It'll take more cutting than that, that's for darn sure. You know, Ron Paul has been all over the media recently talking about the debt ceiling. He doesn't want to raise it. Many House Republicans do. Where do you come out on that question, and how is it possible to play chicken with, our federal government?
Well, you don't. I think we should extract a very high price for raising the debt limit, balanced budget amendment like the Graham-Rudman amendment back in 95, 96. Deep spending cuts in areas that a lot of folks don't want to cut spending. There should be a price for raising that debt ceiling. But the truth of the matter is we've made those promises, we've made those commitments, and we really can't let America default on its obligations. If someone says they are hidebound to not raise the debt limit, then you have to ask them, Jerry, where's the $500 to $800 billion that they're going to cut between April 1st and September 30th in order to make that happen? So it's a game of chicken that we cannot play. But you shouldn't automatically vote for a debt ceiling increase without getting something for that, and that's going to be our plan for the next 3 months, is to make sure we get as much as we possibly can toward deficit reduction, spending cuts, a balanced budget amendment, those things, in order to force the administration and the Senate to do some stuff they might otherwise be willing to do.
Ultimately, though, getting that debt ceiling increase, it sounds like. I have to ask you a question that I get asked on this program by my guests. They say, haven't the Republicans broken their own rules with the health care repeal? There's been no debate. It's come up quickly. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a red herring because we promised last year as part of the campaign that we would have an up or down, straight up or down vote on the health care bill. The debate will be 7 hours, Jerry. We had an hour's debate on the rule itself, but next week, I think when we bring this up, there'll be 7 hours of debate, which may be the length of more debate on repealing it than the Democrats allowed on passage. So we'll have plenty of debate. This is a straightforward page-and-a-half bill that doesn't need a lot of bells and whistles. It's just an up or down vote. And we promised an up or down vote as a part of the pledge to America, and that's what we're going to get. The Democrats will have the supporters of it will have 3.5 hours of debate to make their case to the American people. You heard Governor Pataki say that that's an uphill battle for those who want to keep it in place because it does need to be repealed. So we'll have 7 hours of debate, and this is a false argument that the folks in District 11 back home will ignore this argument.
Congressman, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jerry. Good to be with you.
Okay, if you're fired up about this or any of the issues on the program, just drop us an email.